All right, good afternoon, everyone, and welcome to our February State Advisory Council meeting. We're happy to have everyone this afternoon, and thank you for being here. I know it's a challenging week because of whether it's school break or a town meeting, but we appreciate having you here today. We always start Building Bright Futures meetings with a mindful moment, but just to give you a sense of what our agenda is for today, we are going to be talking a little bit about strategies for how we think about diversifying attendance and participation across the Building Bright Futures network, and really be thinking about cultural liaisons. So you're going to hear from a member of our team, one of our regional managers, Ali Jang. You'll also hear from Matt Levin from the Vermont Early Childhood Advocacy Alliance and Drake Turner from Let's Grow Kids, and they'll be talking about a mid-session legislative update and hearing about priorities across the early childhood system. And then at the end of our meeting today, we're going to be joined by several agency partners, many of whom are already on the line today. So Kendall Smith, who's the Director of Policy Development and Legislative Affairs for Governor Phil Scott, Dan French, who's the Secretary of Education, Dr. Mark Levine, who is our Commissioner for the Vermont Department of Health, and Miranda Gray, who's the Deputy Commissioner for the Child Development Division. So I'm going to hand it over to Beth to do our mindful moment, and then we'll turn into some opening remarks and roll call.
Thank you. So if you would like, you can turn off your video for our mindful moment. You can start by settling into a comfortable position and allow your eyes to close or keep them open with a softened gaze. Begin by taking several long, slow, deep breaths, breathing in fully and exhaling fully. Breathe in through your nose and out through your nose or mouth. Allow your breath to find its own natural rhythm. Bring your full attention to noticing each in-breath as it enters your nostrils, travels down your lungs, and causes your belly to expand. And notice each out-breath as your belly contracts and air moves up through the lungs, back up through the nostrils or mouth. Invite your full attention to flow with your breath. Breathe in, breathe out. Follow the air all the way in and all the way out. Mindfully be present moment by moment with your breath. If your mind wanders away from your breath, just notice without judging, be it a thought, emotion, or sensation that hooks your attention, and gently guide your awareness back to your breathing. As this practice comes to an end, slowly allow your attention to expand and notice your entire body, and then beyond your body to the room you are in. When you are ready, open your eyes and come back.
Thank you all. All right. So as we open today's meeting, I'm Dr. Morgan Crossman. I'm the Executive Director of Building Bright Futures. I am also the mom of a 4-year-old who has no school today. So I may have a little help. So if she comes down, I'll be asking for my team's support in that. But in terms of opening today's meeting, especially because we have many more participants outside of the State Advisory Council, I want to remind folks of BBF's key charges within our state statute. And today we'll specifically talk about monitoring and advising, although it is those are only two of our broader charge within Title 33, Chapter 46 and the Federal Head Start Act. So as many of you know, we are charged with being Vermont's Early Childhood State Advisory Council, which is the primary advisor to the governor and the legislature on the well-being of children prenatal to age 8 and their families. And within those key charges, we are mandated to hold the vision and strategic plan for Vermont's early childhood system, which is the Vermont Early Childhood Action Plan. We're also charged with monitoring progress towards that vision and advising decision makers on how to make progress each year. So we make a series of recommendations. But in addition to that, monitoring happens through every single layer of the Building Bright Futures network, through our regional councils who are identifying the needs, barriers, and challenges of folks on the ground at any given moment in our system. We have 7 strategic plan committees that are continually topically monitoring what's happening in our early childhood system. and supporting the State Advisory Council and making recommendations, and the 23 governor appointed body, which is our State Advisory Council represented here alongside our private partners who are in attendance. And so we have a network of over 450 people that are coming together monthly to do this work and really figure out how we make progress in supporting the well-being of kids and families. And at all times, we are committed to using evidence and data to inform that decision-making using the most up-to-date, high-quality data. And Building Bright Futures serves a critical role in Vermont, operating as a broker of that data and information to guide those policy decisions. So we are consistently elevating the needs and challenges of kids and families, elevating the current and most recent data we can on behalf of private partners, but also both agencies that are supporting kids and families and trying to help them both analyze the data that they have, but elevate it and use it to inform decisions. And one of the ways that we have data available to us outside of what's coming from our state agencies is through larger information gathering efforts in our network. So many of you may remember that between February and December of 2021, we held online discussions and forums and put out a survey to the field, really trying to understand from hundreds of early childhood stakeholders what they feel and currently know about what integration looks like in Vermont's early childhood system. What are the barriers to integration, and where are there opportunities to further integration in our system? And what we heard from partners is that even though we see integration in our system in key areas and we understand the importance of what that is in our system, we are trying to move towards seamless service delivery, cross-sector program alignment, but we're not quite there yet in achieving an integrated system for kids and families. So what you'll see from Building Bright Futures in the next month or so, within the next week or so, is that we've compiled an integration brief where we're able to present what we heard from our stakeholders and in the BBF network. And we'll be putting out an issue brief titled Integration in Vermont's Early Childhood System. Alongside that information gathering effort, BBF was also charged under H171 and Act 45 to oversee and facilitate Vermont's childcare and early childhood education systems analysis. And so we're hoping that the integration brief, alongside us supporting Vermont in understanding the governance and administration of our early childhood system, will help us move forward over the next 3 to 5 years in really meeting the vision that we've outlined for our system through the VCAP. Of note, there are 2 more opportunities for public forums or public hearings on Vermont's childcare and early childhood education systems analysis. So we will be sure before the end of this meeting to put those links and registration dates into the chat. One final note as we think about integration in our system, as we are continually committing to using data to inform decisions, I think it's really important to note that in Vermont, we don't currently have a centralized early childhood integrated data system, which would mean that across and within state agencies, we have one data platform that allows us to look at longitudinal data across our system and understand needs, gaps, and outcomes related to kids and families. So a part of the way that Building Bright Futures is building capacity in the state is by creating a platform called Vermont's Early Childhood Data and Policy Center, and that can be found at vermontkidsdata.org. And that's where we've partnered with over 40 different we've centralized data on over 40 different indicators across sectors and partnered with all of the agencies, departments, divisions, and private partners who have access to data and centralize that data. And we're monitoring our strategic plan through that platform. But I think the big thing that I want you to take away from what we're talking about now in terms of Building Bright Futures charge is that monitoring and advising are only 2 pieces. And ultimately, the reason that we are tasked with doing this work is to hold accountable to the vision we've outlined in the strategic plan. So we have a quasi-governmental network that is here to hold our system accountable to what we've outlined in the strategic plan. And all of our partners across that system really needing to see themselves as partners in meeting that vision and how we hold each other accountable to getting there. So for those of you who are new to Building Bright Futures, we're excited to have you today. And I'm going to hand it over to Cheryl, who is the co-chair of our State Advisory Council, to do roll call before we dive in further. Thanks.
Good afternoon, everyone. This is Cheryl Wilcox from the Department of Mental Health. So for folks that are not part of the State Advisory Council, if you could please introduce yourself in the chat, and then for others, when I call on you, if you can unmute and say hello, that would be great. And I'll start with my co-chair, Chloe.
Hi, everybody. I'm here. Chloe Leary, Executive Director of the Winston Prouty Center. I think this is my last State Advisory Council meeting. It's been a real privilege and honor to serve. Maybe I'll be back when I'm allowed. I don't know, but I am here.
Thanks, Chloe. I will be very sad to lose you as my co-chair. So hopefully you will be back.
March is the last, apparently. I've just been told, so I'll see you next month.
Great. It's a good way to keep you. And then next month they can say, oh no, it's April and it's May. Christy Swenson, you are here. Hard to track all the squares quickly. Christy is from Capstone. I'm going to go to Flor Diaz-Smith.
Hi, everybody. I'm here from Vermont School Boards Association. It's really nice to see everybody and sad to hear we just have one more meeting with Chloe.
Flor. Rebecca Webb.
Hey, everybody. I'm Becca Beth. I'm an Act 166 Regional Coordinator.
Thank you. Amy Johnson.
Hi, everyone. Amy Johnson, Vermont Parent-Child Center Network.
And Eddie Gale. I don't see Eddie's square. It feels like that was probably enough time to unmute, but if not, hop in, Eddie, at any point. Mike McCrae. All right, I'm going to keep going. Paul Dragon, and I see you, Paul. I know you're here.
Hi, Cheryl. Hi, everybody. Paul Dragon. I'm with CVOEO. Good to see everybody today.
Allie Richards.
Hi, everyone. Allie from Let's for Kids. Good to see you.
Alexis Duquette.
Hi, everyone. I'm Alexis Duquette from Putney, Vermont, and I'm here as a parent ambassador or advocate.
Thanks, Alexis. Dr. Ashley Miller.
Hi, it's Ashley Miller. I'm a pediatrician down at South Royalton Health Center. Good to see everyone.
Thank you. Kendall Smith.
Good afternoon, Governor Scott's Director of Policy Development and Legislative Affairs.
Thank you. Ken Jones. Renee Kelly.
Hey, everyone. Sorry, turning on audio and camera. Nice to see you all. Renee Kelly. I currently serve as the director of the Vermont Head Start Collaboration Office, which sits within the Child Development Division.
Thank you. Kate Rogers.
Kate's actually out today.
Thank you. That's helpful. Elisa Stahlberg. I think Elisa may be out today too. I think I emailed her earlier and got an out of office response. And Miranda Gray.
Hi, everyone. Miranda Gray with the Child Development Division.
Thanks. We also got previous regrets from Wendy Trafton with the Agency of Human Services Secretary's Office and Representative Jessica Brumstead. So I'm going to pass it over to you, Chloe.
Actually, Chloe, before you start, because SAC members just quickly mentioned that some of their last meetings are coming up, I just wanted to make sure that folks understand that we have a pretty rigorous process for onboarding new members to the State Advisory Council. So the March meeting will be the last meeting for those of you who are on the last year of your term, but you are required to be there as voting in the new slate of new members and the passing of the baton. So we are excited to see you for that March meeting and know that you will likely still be attending many of these meetings. So appreciate having you.
Yes, sorry for any misinformation. I am going to ask for a motion to approve the November minutes, which went out with the email. Anybody like to give us a motion for that?
So moved, Chloe.
Thanks, Laura. And can we have a second?
I'm happy to second. This is Cheryl.
Thanks, Cheryl. Is anybody abstaining? All right, all in favor? Thumbs up or a yes or a anything? Anybody?
Yeah.
Any opposed? Great, thanks everybody. And hand it back to Beth.
Thanks, Chloe. It's great to see everyone. So for today's, we have started to try and provide some more information about what is happening across the BBF network. And so would like to spend a few minutes today on our BBF network spotlight and invite my colleague, Ali Jang, who's going to talk to us about some of the work that we are involved in that in particular, a focus on our role to advise and empower, as Morgan was talking about. We feel that representation and family voice matter, and to use our statewide network to make sure that these voices are heard and elevated. Family leaders and partners have worked over the last several years to build the Families and Communities Committee, which is now a group of parents and guardians and caregivers and professionals dedicated to improving systems and services for Vermont's families and communities. It's a really cool group, and appreciate everyone who's been involved in both building it and continuing to support it. As one of 7 committees dedicated to advancing Vermont's Early Childhood Action Plan, the VCAP, the Families and Communities Committee plays a critical role in centering the voice and perspectives of families within the state's early childhood system. The committee strives to be made up of majority of parents and caregivers, and they are well on their way with being over 51% parents and caregivers, which is really cool, and they've provided such great insight over the last couple of years as issues have come up. And the committee provides its members a space that values family involvement in decision-making processes and provides opportunities to share concerns and experience gaps and barriers in services with system leaders, and connects families and leaders to advocacy opportunities. So in that light, you know, this is work that we have been committed to and are proud of it. And we feel like BBF can do a better job recognizing that many of our tables are still majority white, majority women, and we really are committed to bringing new and diverse voices to BBF tables. Ali has brought some great ideas and efforts to be able to do this work even better. And Ali, I would love for you to share a little bit about what your vision is and what we're working on.
Thank you, Beth, and thank you everyone for having us here today. And my name is Ali, and Regional Manager for Building Bright Futures, Central Vermont, Franklin Grand Isles, as well as Chittenden County. Today I'm here to talk to you a little bit about the great work happening within the Families and Communities Committee with Hillary Watson, Jen Portman, as well as our Policy Director, Anna Droulet. Just to give you a snapshot of what we have been working on over the past couple of months. Okay, so as you all know, the message from marginalized communities is clear. to achieve a truly equitable, the face of leadership basically must change across all sectors. And in BBF, we do recognize that it's no longer acceptable for marginalized communities to not have a say in their futures or the future of their children. And to increase diversity within our BBF network, we have worked in collaboration with the Families and Communities Committee, Hilary Watson, Jan Portman, alongside our policy director, Anna Drulat. So as you know, the state of Vermont demographic has been changing, and it has been changing, for quite some time, since 1981, when the Vermont Refugee Resettlement Program was created, so known now as USCRI. So we in BBF, we wanted to be intentional in reaching out to historically marginalized communities such as the Native Americans, the New Americans, and these outreach efforts should not by any means replace the already established system that BBF has already created alongside its partners such as all of you, but to simply supplement it around filling the gaps. So our strategies over the past couple of weeks has, three different components. One is to identify a cultural broker. So in the context of the early childhood system, cultural brokers can play an integral part in strengthening our system. So by conducting outreach and providing support to families from different socioeconomic and cultural backgrounds, such as the asylum seekers, the immigrants, the refugees, and other minority groups. So these cultural brokers are tasked to work in collaboration with the co-chairs of the committee and the staff, such as myself and also Anna, and to conduct outreach geared toward exposing families to the Vermont early childhood system via Building Bright Futures. So the second component is basically Building Bright Futures has a unique opportunity to develop, engage, train, and expand leadership development. Building Bright Futures, yes, we do have that opportunity to utilize our partners such as you in order to offer and expand leadership development opportunities to vulnerable populations, such as the Abenakis and New Americans. So these trainings programs should be conducted at a cohort basis, basically within a year. So the training will be beneficial to both the partner organizations as well as the parent and families participants, and will ensure a deeper understanding about agency and programs. It will also expand family leadership, as we all know, building new relationships with people being served but left out often time when assessing service delivery systems, and much, much, much more. And the third component that I wanted to share is about to cultivate diverse family representation in committees. Our network will be strengthened by increasing diversity. Let's also ask ourselves that most of the time when decisions are being made, who is not at the table? What are the needed perspectives we are missing? So our efforts here is in engaging and training families from different socioeconomic backgrounds. Also a component of leadership development by equipping families with the knowledge, the expertise, and understanding necessary to join and participate in key network committees such as the SAC, such as the VCAP, such as other committees, as well as the regional councils. So far, we have been very successful to already identify our cultural brokers from the French community, Kirundi Swahili communities, the Nepali community, as well as the Mai and Somali. We've been meeting with them in making sure they understand our processes, what is BBF, what is this network, who is involved, and also we've been working with them to identify families. So far, also, we have met with all of these community groups that I just have stated. We met with the Mai and Somali families. We met with the Nepalese as well as the Kirundi and Swahili. So by the spring of this year, we also identified the next steps, such as the issues that we identify in order for these families to be successful in our efforts. So we have lesson learned, and by the spring, we will be outlining the next step in boarding new families into this work. So this is exciting work, and I'm so glad to be here and be an active member of the families and communities in diversifying our network. Thank you so much. If anybody has questions, be happy to answer.
Thank you, Ali. Really exciting work, and appreciate you doing that outreach and talking about it here. We do have some time if there are other efforts that folks want to provide updates or questions about this work. They can go in the chat or you can share them verbally.
While we're waiting for some of those questions to come through, I just want to make a couple of connections to the work that Ali's talking about, but also our strategic plan for building bright futures as an organization and the Vermont Early Childhood Action Plan, right? These are goals that we've outlined for our early childhood system, and thinking about how we diversify membership in our network and truly lean into empowering the voices of those who are most marginalized. It's also a goal we've outlined in Building Bright Futures strategic plan for making sure that we have the right voices around the table to help inform decision making. So really, really trying to lean into our statuted work, the goals that we've set for the next 5 years. And I'm really proud of our team for diving in. Go ahead, Renee.
Yeah, Ali, that was great. And it's so exciting to hear about your vision and the work that's happened in really just the last few months. I wonder if you also have thoughts about ways that the other VCAP committees or the State Advisory Council can lean in to the Families and Communities Committee. I mean, as you've talked about, like, this is a group that's coming together to talk about where there are gaps and service provision. And, I certainly feel like it's a great group of parents, and I wonder if there are other opportunities that other VCAP councils can use to tap in. I know there were some efforts to kind of do some crossover work, and I think the Families and Communities Committee had put together a statement for early learning and development at some point. So I'm just wondering if Ali, you or others from BBF might be able to speak to, your vision or your thoughts about where we're going with that cross-pollination. To really ensure that the strong family voice that's been cultivated in the Families and Communities Committee is also permeating other bodies such as professional development and early learning and development, the COPE committee, those types of things.
Yep. I'm maybe going to ask Anna to answer the question, but I also wanted to clarify that, everything that I talked about here is just one element of what the Families and Communities Committee is doing, just one specific element, basically to diversify whatever we've been offering. Now we want to diversify, making sure that other people have access. But Anna maybe can talk more about to your question for that one more.
Sure. Thanks, Ali. I think that's exactly right. This is one really specific scope of the work that we're highlighting for the purpose of today's meeting, Renee. And as you and other folks know, the Families and Communities work is a lot broader and involves the VIP3 grant that we have through HRSA, the 5-year really exciting grant focusing on health and early childhood integration, as well as family engagement. So there's a lot of work happening there in terms of really thinking systematically about the BBF network and the ways in which family voice is really included in each of those conversations. But I appreciate your question, you bringing that up.
Renee, one of the other things that I'm thinking about related to the Families and Communities Committee is that as a state advisory council, it's an opportunity for our team to step outside of the state advisory council meeting and attend those meetings to really be hearing the voices of families as well, and not always asking families to attend this meeting or some of our other VCAP meetings. Just wanting to extend that invitation to state advisory council members that it would be really important and exciting for other members to be attending regional councils, to be attending certain strategic plan committees based on interest and really leaning into the fact that we want to be elevating families as leaders, and what does that look like, and how are we doing that consistently at every level of our infrastructure. Jen.
Thank you. I could go on about this topic, but I'll keep it brief. That's a really good point, Renee and Ali. I second. There's a lot of work around everything that was just mentioned. And one thing that Hillary, the other co-chair, and I co-chair the Families and Communities Committee, have talked a lot about is creating a way where other committees or anybody can submit a document to our committee to review. So like Morgan just mentioned, instead of having families always attend other committees, to have other people come to us. And even if they can't necessarily attend our committee, send us a topic or a document that we could review. And as co-chairs, we will prioritize and review whatever is requested. And that's a great way to kind of be in communication, though our meeting is always open, and we'd love to have anybody come and review. And if there's anything anybody would like to discuss in our committee, feel free to reach out to me or anyone in the BBF team, and they will be in touch. So thank you, Ali, for sharing that. That was a great overview of a lot of the work that we've been focusing on.
Ali.
I just so appreciate this as well, and it seems like this is already thought out, but it feels like what we have been really needing to do is build up an infrastructure, learn the lessons along the way, make sure it is a sort of continuous improvement, as authentic as possible, truly getting to the outcomes that we want instead of just the process pieces. And so I know a lot of us doing work in this area are also trying to say, well, specifically, obviously, for the childcare movement, okay, how can we ensure that families are, truly a part of the policy details, and ensure that all, marginalized communities are a part of those details. And so my great hope, Building Bright Futures is such the right home for this, I feel like. So my great hope is that not only are you able to continue and really have success here, and it sounds like amazing plan and amazing start, and great folks around the table helping you continue to think it through, but can you be really intentionally a resource center for all of the groups out there that maybe are going away or aren't able to put as much time and thought into the process and infrastructure, so that there can really truly be this sort of resource for lots of different organizations or groups that are trying to either do the training internally or to get these outcomes and get this type of engagement, so it can really truly lift all of our efforts up.
Thank you all. Thanks, Ali. Appreciate the comments here. And this is a topic that we tend to come back to. It's so rich and meaningful, and also, I think, a place where we can definitely have room to grow. So if you want more information, let us know. I posted some information about the Families and Communities Committee, and happy to keep you posted about the work with cultural liaisons. So we are going to shift to provide some updates about early childhood priorities happening. And so I'm going to hand this to Morgan to get us started.
Awesome. Thanks, Ali. And thank you all. I'm really proud to have our family advisors on the call today, and I'm really proud of the work that you're doing. So thank you. So annually in February, we traditionally invite our advocacy partners to provide a mid-session legislative update and really dive in on some of the early childhood legislative priorities. It's really important for the State Advisory Council to know what's going on across the different sectors and what that means for kids and families. So today you'll hear from Matt Levin, and he'll be speaking about the Vermont Early Childhood Advocacy Alliance's legislative agenda, and then Drake Turner from Let's Grow Kids, helping us understand what we should be paying attention attention to related to childcare. Just in terms of process, I'd like to ask that both Matt and Drake be able to give their full presentations, and we'll hold questions at the end. State Advisory Council members, please ask questions verbally, and others, please provide questions into the chat. And if we do have a really robust discussion, we will capture those and make sure they go to the right groups afterwards, but we're hoping to have a little bit of discussion after this as well. So I'm going to turn it over to Matt Levin.
Great, thanks, Morgan. It's nice to be here today. Thank you for providing me some time. I'm going to do my best to be very brief and provide an overview of things. I just posted in the chat a link to our recent newsletter that outlines these things in more detail, so you can feel free to go there and get more information. So I think folks know who the Alliance is, or what the Alliance is. We're a statewide advocacy coalition made up of folks across the policy spectrum, focus on advocacy, working in the State House and helping our lead organizations on their campaigns. Our legislative agenda is made up of issues that are brought to us by the lead organizations, and collectively we decide what we're working on. I hesitate to call them priorities because some of you hear me joke often that I love all my children equally. Everything on our legislative agenda is a priority. Some of the issues affect large numbers of people and organizations. Others are more narrowly targeted, but regardless, they're all important and we take them all to be priorities. An important disclaimer that I always give whenever I do this report, the Alliance is not BBF, right? So there's no assumption that any organization involved with BBF has anything to do with our advocacy. If you'd like to know more, we're happy to tell you more. We'd like to include you, but this is for information purposes only. There's no assumption that, blah, 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 blah. So many of you have heard my disclaimer multiple times. It's important just to point out the distinction between the organizations and our different purposes. So the context for this report is that we're about halfway through the legislative session. The House is working on their budget, and the policy committees are writing letters to the Appropriations Committee about their recommendations for how to spend money. The House Appropriations Committee will be working on this process through approximately March 18th. And also important to note, the legislature is taking steps to move back to in-person operations, which affects how we do our work and how folks interact with legislators. It's a very exciting time. It's also a little unnerving, and there's a lot of moving pieces in terms of how logistically things work. So if you're working with legislators, be patient as they try to figure out how to continue to do their work. Again, I'm going to try to be brief and not go through all the details. You can see things in our legislative agenda update, which has more details. But I do want to touch on each of the issues that are in our update. I want to mention who the lead organizations are so folks know who to turn to. So these are in no particular order. Housing and homelessness, there's a lot going on in this area. The governor's recommended budget proposed significant one-time investments in housing development and rehabilitation. There's a question about funding for the Vermont Housing and Conservation Board. The governor did not recommend full statutory funding, but the policy committee is suggesting that there be full funding. That's something that the Appropriations Committee will need to look at. There's also an important bill, S210, the Rental Housing and Safety Bill, that is working its way through the legislative process, and we hope that that bill will pass this session. The lead organization for us on this issue is the Vermont Affordable Housing Coalition. Next issue on our list is Children's Integrated Services. The House Human Services Committee is recommending a funding increase, a case rate increase from $600 a month to $650 a month. We're also suggesting that the legislature allocate funds to support the development of a CIS system-wide data system. This will be one-time funding. We have testified in House Human Services and Energy Technology Committees. Both of them recommend that there be some funding set aside for this. Details are still to be developed. But on CIS, the lead organizations are the Vermont Parent Child Center Network, Winston Prouty Center, and the Vermont Family Network. Next issue is transforming early childhood education, childcare, and workforce. Drake's going to give you an update on that. There's a lot going on in that. Lead organizations are LGK and the Vermont Association for the Education of Young Children. So more on that in a moment. Farm to school and early childhood. We're looking for a modest increase over the governor's recommended budget. And there are a number of organizations involved with that effort. Vermont Feed, Vermont Farm to School and Early Childhood Network, Vermont Farm to Early Childhood Coalition, and Hunger Free Vermont. Universal School Meals is wrapped up in S100, a bill that the Senate passed that was somewhat limited as it came out of the Senate, but it is now being considered by the House Education Committee, and we hope that they'll amend it to expand the coverage to include both universal school breakfast and school lunch, and to make that permanent. So that's just starting to ramp up its activities for the legislative year. Because it passed through the Senate already, it got put on a back burner for a while, but now the committee is starting to move towards the bills that have already passed one chamber. So we expect more attention in the House Education Committee on that in the coming weeks, and Hunger Free Vermont is the lead organization on that. Parent Child Center Network Integrated Grant. We're working with the lead there, the Vermont Parent Child Center Network. This issue is a little complicated to follow because there's a bill in the Senate and the budget is being written in the House. So two tracks. The Senate's working on a bill that would work on statutory language and the authorizations for the parent-child center networks of parent-child centers. Those are statutorily defined, so there needs to be some update of that language. Meanwhile, there's an effort to get a $1.5 million increase in base funding and $3.7 million in one-time funding to the network. That's focused in the House where they're writing their budget. So two tracks going there. On Reach Up, there are a number of issues happening within Reach Up. The first is that the governor's recommended budget included a fairly significant decrease in funding for Reach Up based on a projected caseload reduction. We thought that projected reduction was unrealistic and asked them to look at that more carefully in the legislature. And the House Human Services Committee agreed with that request and did look at it, and is in fact recommending to the House Appropriations Committee that the budget not include the proposed reduction, and that any savings from a caseload reduction that did in fact take place be kept within the Reach Up program. So that's being considered by the House Appropriations Committee. Meanwhile, the House Human Services Committee is also considering a couple of bills which would make some changes to Reach Up, a number of improvements to the program, some of which would increase benefits, create more housing stability, make some other changes. That's up for consideration when they get back next week. So there'll be a lot of action on that in the coming days. Voices for Vermont's Children is the lead organization on that. And finally, family medical leave insurance. There has not been a lot of action on this issue because there's a continued wait for the federal government to take action on it. However, there is an effort to provide a short-term wage replacement program for workers who have to miss work because of COVID-related issues. This would be a state program that would bring back a federal program that did that for a number of months but was ended. So that's being discussed in the Senate Economic Development Committee. Again, that'll come up when they come back next week. There's also we're active across the budget in a lot of different areas. Want to note that we appreciate the intent and the potential positive impact of several tax code and tax credit proposals that have been offered both by the administration and the legislature. As a coalition, we don't have a formal position on them, but there are a number of those that have been proposed that are complicating or enriching, depending on your perspective, the budget discussions as things move forward. We've also been working on a couple of smaller issues that have come up, including the extension of the Medicaid postpartum benefits for a full year. That's something that is a potential for the state to take action on. We are supporting that action by the state to extend the benefits from 6 weeks to a full year. And discussions about how to provide a permanent structure for the statewide diaper bank that's currently supported by the Junior League of Champlain Valley. Just a couple of smaller issues that are important to folks and that we've been working on. So that's really fast. Just wanted to plow through all of that really quickly. And before Drake gives you an update on one more thing, I do want to put in the chat the link to signing up for Early Childhood Day at the legislature. That is a week from Wednesday. So that is Wednesday, March 9th. It's virtual for our side. The legislators will be in person, and we're going to have them come across the street to the Capitol Plaza. We're going to give them lunch and a Zoom screen. Yay. They'll sit at tables regionally, and we'll have a Zoom screen there. So folks from our side will be regionally in Zoom rooms, but the day is the whole day as usual, like we did last year, starting around 9:30, going to 1:30 in the afternoon. The registration's there. We've got nice turnout already, but we need more folks. I'll be honest, we need more folks to sign up. So if you haven't already, please do so. It's a great day. If you have any questions, you can get in touch with me. I'll put my email in the chat as well, and I'll pass it off to Drake to give you more information about the issues that Let's Grow Kids and Vermont AUIC are working.
Thanks, Matt. Thanks, everyone. I think I've joined some of the State Advisory Council meetings as a guest, but it's really nice to get to chat with you all today as well. For those of you I haven't met before, my name's Drake Turner, and I'm the Senior Policy Manager at Let's Grow Kids. And I'm going to do my best to keep this short. I know that there's always so much to update folks about, and there's definitely a lot happening this legislative session when it comes to childcare. And thank you, Matt, for giving that sort of high-level overview as to where we are in the session, so I don't have to say all of those things twice. But I do want to just quickly share my screen to show you a couple of slides here. Hang on one moment. Okay, great. I hope everyone can see this. So I want in the chat to also include, I can put this when I stop my screen share, but I will include a link to a page on our website that has more information about our policy priorities, our legislative agenda this year. So I want to quickly go through those slides anyway, just to ground you all, but there is more detail, and hopefully we'll have a little bit of time for questions. The Let's Grow Kids, and as Matt mentioned, we have partnered with the Vermont Association for the Education of Young Children for our policy agenda this year. I can speak to the Let's Grow Kids side of things, but obviously there are a lot of folks there who can give even more information about some of the workforce specific pieces. But our legislative priorities this year really are split into two main components. The first part is continuing progress on the long-term transformation in our childcare system. We really set the stage for a full transformation in our childcare system last year with the passage of H171 and Act 45. Morgan alluded to a little bit of the work that's happening this year as a product of that, the passage of that bill, which is the systems analysis that BBF has taken lead on, and that's really moving along really wonderfully to talk about some of the governance and accountability structures in our childcare system. But there are a lot of other components of that bill. So we're working really in close partnership with, state partners, with the legislature, with other partners on the ground, and with programs across Vermont to ensure the continued implementation of that bill. And one of the components that we're really focused on this legislative session is making sure that the childcare financing study, which is another one of the studies included in that bill, but was not funded in H171, has the resources that it needs to move forward and to really keenly study what it would take to meet the goals of H171, which are a 10% affordability standard for families and ensuring that early childhood educators are well compensated and supported, as those are two main goals of that bill. We also have been working to establish in statute a childcare capacity development program to continue work that's really been done in Vermont for years to continue to support childcare businesses of all types to open, expand, create more capacity in our childcare system, and access the resources and expertise they need to ensure their businesses are sustainable. And then we're also continuing to advocate for further investments in affordability through the Childcare Financial Assistance Program. So that's one main part of our legislative agenda, and that's sort of the other component is meeting the moment we're in right now and supporting our early childhood education workforce with one-time dollars. As we know, I think it became very clear last fall that there's, staffing has been difficult for programs for years because of low pay and, often without benefits for early childhood educators. And it really has come to kind of a breaking point starting last fall, especially with entering the third year of a pandemic, working with the last unvaccinated population in Vermont. This is really difficult work. And for a lot of folks, it's unsustainable. So we last fall, again, in collaboration with many of our partners and with programs across the state, put our heads together to really think about what we can do right now in the short term to support the early childhood education workforce and to recruit and retain early childhood educators, while the studies that are outlined in H171 can really deeply look at how we can sustainably solve our big workforce crisis, which will really be the work in 2023. So we know that these proposals aren't going to solve the staffing crisis in childcare programs, but we really want to do what we can to support the workforce right now. And we also know that, stresses in the early childhood education workforce are exacerbating our broader workforce development crisis because people can't work if they don't have access to childcare. So I don't want to run through all of these. I know we have limited time, but we are advocating for a number of uses of one-time funds to support the workforce right now, including an early childhood education recruitment campaign at the Vermont Association for the Education of Young Children, quarterly retention bonuses for early childhood educators, and supports in accessing healthcare and affording healthcare premiums, potentially expanding the student loan repayment support program that was passed in H171 to cover more early childhood educators, as well as no-cost childcare. So how can we work with what we have right now, one-time federal dollars, one-time state dollars, to help people to hang on and continue doing this work that they're really passionate about. So those are the sort of the broad strokes of our legislative agenda this year. And for a quick recap or update on where we are right now, I just want to talk about a couple of key bills that we have been really focused on. The first one is H679, which is the Budget Adjustment Act for 2022. So that's kind of the mid-year course correction to the budget. It's a bigger budget adjustment this year than historically budget adjustments have been, due in large part because of the amount of federal investments we have right now and because of the pandemic. But there are two pieces that are relevant to childcare in this bill. There's language that authorizes the Joint Fiscal Office to begin work on that childcare financing study that I mentioned earlier, which is wonderful. They actually requested that the legislature authorize them to start work in selecting a contractor and a consultant to get that study moving forward, because they want enough time to do it and they want to start earlier than was intended in H171. There's also in the Budget Adjustment Act $6 million in federal ARPA dollars to support a round of retention bonuses for staff in childcare programs. And there's language in there ensuring that it won't push folks off of the benefits cliff, and that it would be available to all staff and programs, not just early childhood educators, because we know there are a lot of support staff in programs that really need access to those funds as well. So we're continuing to track the Budget Adjustment Act. There was a conference committee last week that agreed on the differences between the House and Senate versions of that bill, and we're continuing to track that. There's also a lot in play in the FY23 budget. I think there are some folks from the administration that can speak a little bit more to the childcare components of that bill, but we're supportive of further investments in the childcare financial assistance program and expansions of tax credits for families and the creations of tax credits for early childhood educators. We also are continuing to advocate for those emergency investments for the early childhood education workforce. And that conversation is really happening right now in the House Commerce and Economic Development Committee. They're working on a workforce development bill, H703. And we last week, along with a lot of other folks, had a really wonderful morning in that committee talking about how that workforce development bill can include investments in the early childhood education workforce. We know that's a workforce that's just very important to our broader workforce in Vermont. So we are advocating that those investments I mentioned in that emergency investment slide are considered as part of H703. And then the capacity development program component of our legislative agenda I mentioned earlier as well. There's language in a bill that's currently under consideration in the House, H676, that we're also advocating be included as part of the workforce development bill that's currently under consideration in the House Commerce Committee. So there's a lot going on. Childcare continues to really be a priority in the legislature and of the administration. We hear folks talking about childcare in almost every committee, it seems, these days. And so we're committed to continuing to do all that we can to make sure that the field is supported and that we are continuing to make progress on our long-term goals. So I'm sorry for going a little bit over, folks, but thank you so much for bearing with me, and I will stop my share right now.
Thank you, Drake. And thank you, Matt. We are running a little bit over time, but I will allow 1 or 2 questions from the State Advisory Council and others in the chat. SAC members, any questions about any of the priorities for kids and families across what we're seeing in the legislature right now? Okay, we'll make sure that you have access to be able to reach out to Drake, to Matt, but also all of the other programs that are leading some of the advocacy in those areas. Any other legislative updates that our board members want to call attention to? Anything else that folks are tracking on the State Advisory Council related to children and families? Okay, I want to name a few just to make sure you're tracking a few that we are also tracking. So S283, an act relating to miscellaneous changes to education laws. I now have a 4-year-old helper, so bear with me. Mommy. Hi, Emily. Mommy. Beth, I'm going to transition to you if you want to just lead through that list.
There's also H703, which is an act relating to promoting workforce development. H707, potential discussion of universal pre-K. And I'm going to leave it at that, given our timing and transition. We are thrilled to be joined by several agency leaders who are also going to give some updates on COVID response and guidance, legislative priorities, early childhood investment, cross-agency collaborations, and programmatic updates. So of note, representatives from DCF, VDH, and the Agency of Education serve as members of the State Advisory Council, but we also want to ensure that our secretaries and commissioners, hey Emily, are able to spend a bit of time each year with the SAC as well. So we have invited them. So we're going to start invite Kendall Smith, who's the Director of Policy Development and Legislative Affairs for Governor Phil Scott. Kendall, if you want to start, and then we will move to Agency of Education Secretary Dan French.
Great. Thank you so much, Beth, and good afternoon again, everybody. And thank you for the chance, Beth and Morgan and everybody, for the opportunity to speak today. I'm just going to kick it off really briefly here, and then like you said, Beth, I'm going to turn it over to Secretary French. You also mentioned we have with us today Deputy Commissioner Miranda Gray, as well as Commissioner Dr. Levine, and together the 4 of us will cover some of the governor's legislative priorities in this space and proposed investments for the year. Drake and Matt, you all already covered a really thorough list of the early childhood topics that are being taken up. So again, we'll touch on some of the things the governor has proposed, but we'll also speak about managing COVID-19 as we move from the pandemic to endemic stages of the past 2 years over the course of the pandemic. I may weigh back in towards the end if there's time about how we're scaling up quickly to expand access to after school and summer programs, but we'll see how we're doing here, knowing that we're about 10 minutes over schedule. At a really high level, the investments the governor is making across the spectrum in childcare, pre-K, K through 12 literacy, summer and after school, CTE, post-secondary education and training are all about building a comprehensive and seamless system that's supporting people living in Vermont from birth through employment. I'd also like to mention, like everybody here, we're watching for any federal action to support and expand pre-K and childcare. We're really encouraged with what was in the Building Back Better package. Fingers crossed. I know that that's all up in the air, but if anything happens in that space, that the federal government is recognizing the strengths of a mixed delivery system like we have here in Vermont. And between the Agency of Human Services and the Agency of Education, we're beginning to think through what Vermont would need in place to be an adopter if there ends up being any movement on the federal level. Also, on behalf of the governor, and I know I'm going quick here, but I want to make sure there's enough time for everybody else on the team to weigh in. We want to thank the child care providers and the caregivers that are here today for all you've done over the past 2 years and what you continue to do for families as we, like I said earlier, are navigating from the pandemic stages of COVID-19 to endemic. So with that, I am going to pass it off to Secretary French. So Secretary French, if you want to weigh in.
Yeah, thanks, Kendall. Good afternoon, and thank you for the invitation to be here today. I'm going to talk a bit about COVID-19 to echo and follow up on Kendall's remarks, but I'm also going to introduce Dr. Levine, so he'll embellish and no doubt probably correct some of what I'm about to say, which are my observations leading some of that work with the education system. I'll also make some comments on policy as well. But just to follow on what Kendall said, firstly, I just want to thank you for your work. It's hard to talk about COVID-19 without starting with thanking everyone for their dedicated service to the state and to our system. It's been greatly appreciated. It's clear now we're on the downward side, I would say, of the Omicron trend, at least. I just make a few observations. Again, Dr. Levine will color this in a bit. But from my perspective, we're making a shift now. The recommendations that we've had in place this year for schools and childcare are going to start to shift from essentially organizational recommendations to individual recommendations. And also in that context is the idea of moving from sort of organizational level to the individual, but also this idea of moving beyond specific recommendations for childcare in schools and trying to situate recommendations for them in the broader societal recommendations. So not unlike what we experienced coming out of the state of emergency last year, that I think we're heading towards sort of broad recommendations for all Vermonters under which schools and childcare settings will be able to function. I think we're able to do that again from my perspective because while we're seeing cases, and no doubt we'll see cases come and go in schools and childcare centers, variants will no doubt come and go. But meanwhile, all along in the last 2 years, the risk to serious illness from the virus has been decreasing, and that's largely as a result of vaccination and also new treatments coming online. So it's important. I know it feels like we've been going through this sort of ups and downs of the cycle, but it's also important to acknowledge that we're in a totally different place than we were 2 years ago. And a big factor relative to that is the fact that the risks are declining at a regular pace. So that's important to acknowledge. Along those lines, some of you might have noticed the CDC came out with new recommendations on Friday last week. I just want to let you know we're in early phases of evaluating the impact on Vermont. Dr. Levine can certainly follow up on this, but we hope to have an announcement out later this week about next steps in Vermont's response. In terms of policy, and particularly childcare and pre-K policy, as Kendall mentioned, we were very excited to hear about the President's Build Back Better initiative. In collaboration with CTD, we did convene several meetings inside of state government. We brought in Morgan. I want to thank her for her leadership, as well as Claire Waterman, some of you know. Basically just a brainstorm as to what was in the legislation and its potential impact on Vermont. And I think we all concluded that this would have been and perhaps still is a catalyst moment for us to really take our system to the next level, so to speak. And specifically through that collaboration, I wanted to surface some of the themes that we were able to identify, and they sound familiar based on some of the policy summaries you've heard already today. First and foremost, we were focused on the workforce issues, and that's not necessarily just a common strand in this policy space, but across so many different areas that we're operating today, predated the pandemic, but certainly has been exacerbated by the pandemic. But thinking about how to scale the current system, we immediately run into workforce concerns. How do we have a very direct and aggressive strategy around the development of the recruitment pipelines, recruitment strategies themselves? How do we retain folks that are currently in the profession so we can continue to operate high quality programs? A second theme we identified pretty easily, again, are equity issues, and this pertains to funding, access, transportation, and then specifically quite a bit of conversation around dosage, or the amount of time that children spend in the programs. And then lastly, concerns around data, and how we can continue to build a sense of an integrated data system, particularly factoring in attendance, dosage, and other data that we currently don't have well represented in our data models. And just how can we make continued progress at the state level to continue to integrate the systems that we do have, and so we can provide a more comprehensive view of what's going on inside the system. It does look like the federal initiative is on hold, but I thought, again, I wanted to share the result of our sort of collaboration inside of state government and some of the themes we emerged. I don't think any of them are news to any of you, but I thought I would share that information and just say that these are ideas that we intend to pursue in the future as we contemplate improvements to our already excellent childcare system. Why don't I leave it at that? I'll turn it over to Dr. Levine, Commissioner of Health, who can provide some additional comments on COVID-19 and other issues relative to this policy space.
Thank you, Secretary French. I hope I don't disappoint too many people by not expounding on COVID too much, because then I'll never get to say all the things you asked me to say. I was asked to talk about urgent and long-standing early childhood topics. And gee, I had to really think hard. There's clearly no shortage of these. And most of you are very aware that VDH, and specifically our MCH division, Maternal Child Health, are inextricably linked together with you all. And we want to thank you for all that you do and the power of our collaborations and our partnerships. So in my brief comments, I'm going to focus on 6 areas, one of which is COVID response and recovery, another help me grow, home visiting, Dulce or Dulce, depending on how you like to pronounce it, primary care and mental health integration, and the early childhood comprehensive systems. And I'll be very brief on each of these. With regard to COVID response and recovery, which is of course going to be focused on schools and childcare for the purpose of this conversation. Basically, we are continuing to provide a lot of support in schools with guidance, technical assistance, support, childcare programs, families, especially related to rollout of vaccine, 6 months to less than 5 years, which will be coming soon to a neighborhood near you in the next couple of months. And of course, the shift from pandemic to endemic. So we co-create guidance with the Agency of Education and our childhood CDD section of DCF regarding the response and the mitigation in schools and childcare respectively. We do provide a lot of webinars and other educational opportunities with regard to technical assistance to the field. There's a lot of health and safety guidance on health topics that work through the state school nurse consultant and local health school liaisons. And we're expanding health and safety guidance to childcare through 2 new public health nurses and local MCH coordinators. Everybody here knows Help Me Grow very well. And it's clearly Vermont's go-to resource for connecting families to information and support, including needed resources and mental health services. MCH is really the state lead for HMG, and we currently fund the system. Bottom line is we link families with young children to the information, support, and services that they need to thrive. Stay in touch to provide support before, during, and after they're connected. Offer ongoing technical assistance and training to healthcare providers and early childhood workforce to increase developmental screening through use of the Ages and Stages questionnaire system online. And use of that online system increased significantly during the pandemic, with now over 7,000 screens completed. Regarding home visiting, one of my very favorite topics, we're again in partnership with our Child Development Division and Vermont Medicaid to substantially expand the Strong Families Vermont Sustained Home Visiting. This includes the addition of a fully funded family support model, parents as teachers, as well as additional capacity to our current nurse home visiting model, MESH. Currently, we're finalizing a Medicaid state plan amendment, planning for training, and in the early phases of developing a promotional campaign to increase awareness and normalize home visiting. I'm also a big fan of Dulce, and the Vermont Dulce and Care Coordination work continues to be a very successful approach set in a pediatrics office, which proactively addresses the so-called social determinants of health, promotes the healthy development of infants, and provides support to their parents and caregivers. Family specialists work collaboratively with the pediatric practice, the parent-child center, and other supports and service providers in the community and state. These family specialists are experts in their community's culture, strengths, and needs. So far, Dulce is active in 5 pediatric practices across Vermont. A 6th practice in Newport is currently recruiting for the family specialist role and should begin enrolling this calendar year. A few words about primary care and mental health integration. Vermont has received HRSA funding for pediatric mental health access in primary care. We'll be standing up a pediatric psychiatric consultation service this spring and providing training, technical assistance, and quality improvement in pediatric medical homes. I'm proud that I'm a co-chair of the Mental Health Integration Council, and that work dovetails very nicely with everything I've just spoken about. VDH's approach to this work, as per our mission, is generally around upstream prevention measures, especially those that I've already highlighted, like home visiting, Help Me Grow, and Dulce. We also have a grant and are working in collaboration with our Department of Mental Health regarding suicide. Finally, the Early Childhood Comprehensive Systems Health Integration Prenatal to 3 Opportunity. We're in partnership with Building Bright Futures because we received federal HRSA funding for that mouthful that I just recited. The short title we could just call Vermont Integration P3. The purpose of the funding is to build integrated maternal and early childhood systems of care that are equitable, sustainable, comprehensive, and inclusive of the health system, and that promote early developmental health and family well-being and increase family-centered access to care and engagement of the prenatal to 3 population. We're only in year 1, so a lot of planning is still ongoing, although some of the activities are already in progress. Now I'd like to pass the baton to our Deputy Commissioner for DCF, Miranda Gray.
Thank you, Dr. Levine. And thank you all. Once again, I'm Miranda Gray, the Deputy Commissioner for the Child Development Division. I truly appreciate the opportunity to speak with the State Advisory Council and all those that have joined us today to outline the exciting opportunity and the investments that are proposed for the child care and school age providers, as well as families with children in these age groups. Commissioner Brown sends his regrets for not being able to join you all, but asked me to share our following joint remarks. The COVID-19 pandemic has cast a spotlight on the already strained early childhood workforce. The need for more staff and supports for the existing staff are on the forefront of our minds. The Child Development Division has been very fortunate to receive numerous federal allocations to run programs like the Coronavirus Response and Relief Supplemental Appropriations Act, which provided $12 million for childcare programs, which ended in December of last year. This allowed programs to purchase PPE, invest in capital improvement projects, pay for things like rent, insurance, mortgage, utilities, and also wages and bonuses. Currently, the Child Development Division is running the American Rescue Plan Act Stabilization Fund, which invests $29 million for childcare programs to pay things for like personnel costs, including salary increases or bonuses, rent, and PPE. This is federal funding This federal funding is currently supporting over 920 childcare providers, which is roughly 77% of eligible programs. The program began in November and will run through October of this year. Last year, Act 45, as has been previously mentioned today, passed, which allowed for the creation of 2 new workforce investments, a student loan repayment program and a prospective student scholarship program, with the goal of supporting those already working in this field and incentivizing new educators to enter the field. We hope to have both programs up and running by the spring of this year. The Child Development Division has also been working to restart the Child Development Associate program at the Career Technical Education Centers. So the focus on investment in trades in the 2023 budget bill resonates strongly with us as an investment that is needed. The $12 million proposal for the Child Development Division is another approach to both support the childcare workforce by increasing the payment to providers, which could allow them to increase wages, while also giving families more opportunities to access childcare. The increase of approximately $5 million in the Child Care Financial Assistance Program will allow families to access 75% of providers with no additional payment beyond their family copay, thus broadening access to care for low and middle income families. This proposal also includes increasing provider close days from 15 to 30 and family vacation days from 10 to 20, thereby allowing families and providers more flexibility to meet the needs of their program and family without fear of not having these days paid for by the state. The $7 million proposal to expand the provider network of after-school and summer programs for school-age children builds upon what we learned from the Summer Matters initiative last year. The pandemic has been incredibly challenging for children of all ages. And last year, through Summer Matters, we were able to serve over 12,000 children. We want to be able to continue supporting this need as it allows Vermont children to make much needed peer connections while allowing their parents and caretakers the ability to work with the assurance that their children are well cared for in a program that is affordable for the family. The budget also proposes expanding the Child and Dependent Care Tax Credit, which is yet another tool to help parents and caretakers afford care. The governor's proposal expands the credit to 65% of the federal amount and will make the credit fully refundable, meaning if the credit is more than you owe in taxes, you'd get money back. The governor's budget also creates a child care worker income tax credit. This is a $1,000 refundable income tax credit for all child care workers providing private pre-K or child care services within the regulated system. We believe this credit will help recruit and retain additional child care workers to ensure we have the workforce we need to offer Vermonters affordable and accessible child care. I feel compelled to share my excitement of the possibility of both supporting childcare and after-school providers, as well as families with the many components of the workforce package. Another area of focus within the Child Development Division is capacity building. I'm excited to share that in partnership with Let's Grow Kids, we've been able to allocate $1.6 million in this state fiscal year, and we have another $2.4 million in state fiscal year 23 to build up capacity for infant, toddler, and preschool slots. We are currently putting together a request for proposal to find an entity to focus on building school-age capacity using our American Rescue Plan Act discretionary funds. This will complement the $7 million school-age expansion that I previously mentioned. Also, to just quickly, I think Secretary French really already hit on this, but I did want to make note that our partners at AOE and here in the Child Development Division have been closely following the proposed Build Back Better Act and spent time in both December and January working jointly to identify the areas of the universal pre-kindergarten plan that are going well and what could be built upon, strengthening if the legislation were to pass. I feel like we are well poised to take next steps if and when the time comes. At this time, I'd like to turn the floor back over to Kendall Smith, who will share a bit more about the investments for summer programming. Thank you all for allowing me this time to share all the exciting proposals that have been put forward this year.
Sure, thanks, Miranda. Looking to Beth or Morgan, is there still time to talk about summer for a minute, or?
Yeah, Kendall, please say a few more words about summer and after school programs, and then we'll open the floor for the board to ask a couple of questions.
Sure, absolutely. So Miranda covered a little bit about what we did over the past summer through what we were calling Summer Matters. And our real focus was on helping kids and families re-engage after 2 years of remote working and remote learning and being isolated from their communities and their peers. That was a really successful initiative. Miranda just went through that. I won't repeat it. But I think it was about, Miranda, correct me if I'm wrong, or Secretary French, but I think about 2 weeks now ago, we opened applications for a second round of grants of about just under $5 million, and we're calling those expanding access grants. And what they're for is for nonprofits, childcare providers, community organizations, basically any summer or after school provider that's not school-based, to apply to expand their slots or their programming or their amount of weeks, et cetera, for the 22-23 school year for after school programs, or for this coming summer, and which is summer, what year are we in now, 22? So summer, sorry, 2022, and part of summer 2023. We're really excited about it. The intent to apply feedback that we've gotten is tremendous. If anyone here is interested in being a grant reader, I'll make that plug. We're looking for more grant readers and scorers. So if you are interested in doing that, if you could give your name to Morgan and she'll give it to me, I could get you some more information. So we're really looking forward to what we've been able to accomplish with these funds so far, and what we are going to do in the future. It's part of the governor's goal to expand to, hopefully at some point here, universal summer and after school programming for all families, regardless of your geographic location or your socioeconomic status. As folks may be aware, it hasn't been a huge I guess, point of conversation per se, but through the cannabis laws, some of that revenue goes to supporting summer and after school programming. So right now we're using these federal dollars as kind of a bridge to get to the long-term sustainable funding source, and doing some of that planning between now and then. We think that money might be available come summer 2024, depending on, again, the rollout of the legalized cannabis market. It's kind of weird to talk about cannabis in connection with childcare. I'll recognize that with this group, but that's the funding source. And so anyway, if folks are interested in knowing more about that work or getting engaged with us on that work, we have a really active task force that's doing all the strategic planning for it. And like I said, we could use more grant readers for this coming round of applications, and feel free to get in touch.
Perfect. All right. Thank you, Kendall. And thank you to all of our agency leaders for being here today. To the board, I'd love to ask for each of you to turn your cameras back on, switch it to gallery view so that you're able to see each other. I know we have much less time for discussion. This was definitely an information heavy meeting, but it's really important mid-legislative session that you all have the time to hear, both from our advocacy partners, private partners, and the administration about the current priorities. So do folks on the board have questions that they'd like to ask verbally to any of our members of the administration? And we'll also post a few prompts in the chat bar as well. Go ahead, Flor.
Just a quick, I guess it's for all. First, thank you for coming. This is super informative and a lot, to handle all at once. But just to, the governor has been talking about having a tax rebate, and as we can see, there's no shortage of needs for kids. So in your capacity, if we could help encourage the governor to reinvest that money in CTE and infrastructure, for example, for our schools, and childcare would be really greatly appreciated.
Thank you, Flor. Other questions, comments for the administration? I'm going to post a few questions in the chat for board discussion as well. So as you're thinking about the range of topic areas that you've heard today, what do you feel really excited about? Are there things you didn't know that the administration or our advocacy teams were tackling, and really prompting you to think about how this is aligned with our strategic plan for Vermont's early childhood system? Allie?
Hi, wow, you're getting good at seeing the unmutes. I just want to thank everyone for being here. I think it's really just a huge step that we're all in these forums together, in these rooms together, having this conversation. So thank you to BBF for creating that forum. And I would, I really enjoyed the information. I especially was interested to hear about the sort of preliminary work preparing for potential federal action like Build Back Better, should it still move forward on some cases with pre-K and childcare, I'm very curious in continuing to sort of keep this open dialogue with all the parties around here, because again, decades and decades, this work has continued and will continue with folks from the field, trying to have a really intensive public and private partnership as we develop recommendations. There's the systems analysis work that we're all also a part of right now. And I'm curious if that and other forms like that might be ways for us to continue to all be talking together about preparing for federal action too. Just using, again, the tools and the tables so that we really truly stay on the same page and prepare for great potential reinforcements like that from the feds.
Thank you, Allie. I do think that especially as we navigate what's coming in terms of recommendations for the systems analysis, there will be lots of opportunities for folks to be talking again at these public-private partner tables to say, how do we move our early childhood system forward? And I am still hopeful that there will be strong components of Build Back Better that are coming through in different ways, whether or not it's the comprehensive package that was originally introduced. Other questions and comments? All right. Well, if there are no other questions, I am seeing a couple of folks respond in the chat. If you have other questions, we're happy to transition those to our agency leaders, to our advocacy partners. We're really excited to have so many folks around the table who are caring about our kids and families. I'd really like to continue some of these discussions over the next couple of months at the State Advisory Council. Not all of our meetings are as heavy in terms of the information, but I think it's really important for our board members to understand what the priorities are, what's happening in the legislature if you're not actively in testimony. What are the priorities of the administration? What are things that you care about that you didn't know were happening? So we'd love to hear from you after this meeting as well. What are some of those things that you heard that you either want more information about or that we as a board should be tackling in terms of these priorities in the next few months? So really appreciate your time today. And we look forward to seeing folks at our March meeting. Beth or Anna, if you can please put in the chat the dates for the 2 public hearings related to the early childhood systems analysis. We want to make sure that folks are attending those meetings and making sure that your voices are heard. We are getting close. I saw Elliot Regenstein on the call today, one of our national partners who is leading that systems analysis, but we're getting closer to our April meeting where we'll start to hear about the potential recommendations for how we think about transforming our early childhood system. So excited to have all of you on the call, and we will see you for our March meeting. And thank you to members of the administration who are here today.